Well, welcome to another episode of Braveheart Talks. Thank you for joining in today, and a happy Mother's Day week to all of you mamas out there. And because it is the week of Mother's Day, I have three very special guests on set with me today, and they are in fact my three sons. So really this could go one of two ways. We might just even shut this podcast down. However, you get to hear a lot about me, and you often will hear from Luke as well, but you never really get to hear from the boys. We're all anchored into church, and we are in fact four generations in the church now, because I have my parents, I have myself, my kids, and Joash, you are a dad yourself now. So let me just introduce you. Joash is my firstborn, my oldest. And then the middle one, who's by no means the middle child, Isaac.
Thanks for having me.
And Solomon, who is still my baby in many ways, really. And so, boys, thanks for jumping on set today and agreeing to do this.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah.
Are we going to behave?
Right.
Are we going to be good? Let's just jump in and have some conversation. Okay, let me just ask you some fun questions. First of all, when you think about your childhood, what words come to mind?
Turbulent.
Wow.
Fast, very fast. It was never slow.
Yeah.
There's always something going on. It wasn't just chilled out.
Chaotic. Probably,
Chaotic.
you know?
No, I'd say good. Exciting. It was
Yeah.
exciting.
Yeah,
Growing
it
up
was.
with parents who were planting church and just being involved in church and everything that comes with that. So I'd definitely say exciting. It definitely wasn't an ordinary upbringing, was it?
No.
Yeah.
No, it was a very fast-paced life. We planted the church. Sol, you were only a toddler, and you were both sort of primary school. You just started high school,
No,
and
I just started high school.
Yeah, I think I was
You must have been year
Year
9.
nine.
Yeah, so I was just starting high school.
so it was a very fast-paced life, but fun nevertheless.
Yes.
Would you've changed it if you could?
Maybe a few things, but
No.
no, it was great.
You'd have kept it as it was. What do you remember most about our family culture growing up? Because I think every family has a culture. What do you remember, like, about the character of our family?
I think it was very it's language I'd use when I'm teaching in school now, but it was firm and fair. So we had really, really tight guidelines of these are the expectations of our household, but that wasn't to limit us or for an element of strictness. It was, so now as we're older and as we're finishing uni and working and having our own families, we're incorporating that, there's expectations on how we are to live our life, and that's so we can live our life to the full.
Yeah, I love that, because it's like, would you say then that growing up with boundaries was healthy? Because we've talked a lot about that in church lately, and sometimes I think when you're younger, you kick back on boundaries. You don't necessarily like them. You think, oh, your parents are being really strict. But were those boundaries helpful or hurtful to you?
I think at the time, for me, it definitely felt hurtful because I was like no one else in my school, or I think when I was in high school, there was like no one similar to my age other than the latter stages of high school in church. So like my friendship group was mainly in school, and none of those guys had the, I guess, boundaries that I did. So at the time it was definitely like, are they just doing this because they hate me? Like it's a punishment. But obviously now looking back, I can see it was to help me in that. So
Yeah. What about you, Sal?
Yeah, I think it was. I think our family was tight knit. Is what I would say it was. I think we went through a lot of seasons together as a family. I think even just starting a church was a family thing. It wasn't just a mum and dad thing. We were all involved from day one. So I think we stormed some seasons together, and I would probably, if we could narrow it down to one word, it'd be tight knit probably.
That's good. That's good to know. Now, here's the thing. I think the idea of this podcast is that there'll be a lot of young mums out there now who are perhaps raising their children. Maybe they're in the toddler season like yourself, Joey, or maybe their children are a little bit older. Maybe they're in the season of children that are kicking back on church or faith life. And so I think this podcast really, for me, is to give those women some encouragement to be able to say, keep going. The Bible says when you train your children and you raise your children in the ways of God, when they are older, they will not depart from it. So you're now young adults and you are making the choice to be followers of God. But when you're, and I'm so excited about that. And I'm so happy that you've made these choices for yourself. But obviously when you were growing up, you were typical boys, like, in every which way you were typical boys. And so sometimes people could look at our life and go, yeah, you know, it's all right for you, look at your boys. And I'm like, no, you really don't know them. Like, we had some fun and some storms when you kids were growing up. But just talk to me, like, tell me, like, what is a lie that you told that you perhaps thought I never knew about? Isaac, you go first.
So we start with the glue in the attic and the PlayStation.
Yeah,
Oh,
I think that's more on Sol. That wasn't a me thing. And
Was that when there was a...
the PlayStation just glue or paint all over.
There was
it.
a big yellow tub like PV, not like,
And it was Isaac.
it was but I
It
think
was
it was
glue,
you.
was it glue or paint? A huge...
Sorry.
Was it a huge tub?
Yeah, it was a great big
Yeah,
tub.
and
and
one day we
Isaac
went
left
up
all
and it
over
was
the
all
place.
over the. We had like an attic, but it was like a loft space, wasn't it? But we'd all go.
It was like a play area.
Yeah, and it was all over the carpet, the cushions, and it was all in the PlayStation. It was like in the PlayStation drive, like the CD drive.
And hang on,
all
you
of the controllers.
all blamed the dog.
No.
You told the dog.
No, the original story was that it only could have been Sol because he was the only one playing and accessing that space at the time. But now looking back, I'm starting to think it was Isaac.
If it was me, honestly, hang on. If it was me, I would have just said now, yeah, it was me. Like I'm not holding on to it that long. I'm not that bothered. But you keep throwing the card around like it's some kind of, it wasn't me. It wasn't me.
I know. I'm not saying
Isaac, was it you?
No, but
It cost us a fortune.
Well, we were talking.
It was an insurance job. We lost PlayStation. We lost carpet.
We talked about this literally
It's
before,
terrible.
and you were like, "Yeah, well, that was Sol," and now you've sat down in front of the cameras and you've gone, "I think it was Isaac." Now that was not me.
What about the time the cooker got smashed? Who smashed the cooker?
That was Sol.
Hang on a minute, that was me and Isaac, so don't even just say that was me.
Yeah,
There was
two.
two-
On the Diddy car.
Let me explain. We were on the Diddy car, which was like this little red thing we used to drive around the house. You say it was my fault because I was steering. You were pushing
Yeah.
from the back, so you made me go too fast so that I couldn't steer around it. So we went into
And the
the
other
oven.
one that you've done was smash the mirror in a holiday.
No. Oh, sorry, what was the question here? Because everything that's been raised, it's somehow on me here. And all three things that you've mentioned, I didn't do any of it. There was a thing in Florida, for the purposes of the podcast, that me and Joash would fight a lot growing up, and that was just something we...
You smashed a mirror in
Yeah.
a villa that we'd rented.
So rented, but he pushed me against
What was
it.
your punishment?
They both took our wallets off us, so we had to go to
Because
our...
we'd saved money for months so we could buy nice American clothes while we were in America.
And we took your wallets away from you.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Because
but
no one would admit to smashing the mirror. Who was it?
it was Joe. He pushed me again. I can never to this day still say the actual words that he said, but
Not live.
not live. I don't even think I could tell it off camera. But he pushed me against the mirror and the mirror cracked. I got the blame again.
Wow. Who used to punch the holes in the wall and deny there was
Joey.
holes in the wall?
That was me. FIFA would get the better of me sometimes. A lot of testosterone and hormones when you're 14, 15 and you lose a last minute goal on Ultimate Team.
So really,
The ball was
raising
getting
boys in a house meant that the hallway was the football field. The footballs went through the stained glass window in the hallway, smashed lights out, smashed mirrors, We had a lot of broken
roof.
things.
The shed roof.
What was
the
the
shed
shed
roof?
We sat on top
The
of the
shed roof, they
and
went on
ripped
the
all
shed roof
the-
and pulled all the
Me
leather.
and who? Huh?
And
Found that plaster as well.
Listen, but I just remember this one story, and I think this is important that we tell
I'm
this
sorry,
story.
Mum. There's one lie that we haven't talked about.
What's that?
You used to send me and Josh up on the Xbox to have half an hour each.
Yes,
And you'd say, you can have half an hour, and then he can have half an hour.
yes.
And then we'd come down, and what would happen?
I'd just say to you, if you had a nice time,
And what would I say?
you'd say yes.
Yeah. And what had actually happened was you'd have half an hour, and then you'd look at me and you go, I'm having your half an hour, Isaac. And then he would play on it, and then you'd say, you're going to go and tell your mum and dad that you've had a nice time. So then I'd go downstairs and we'll go, I was going, I've had a great time, Mum.
Okay, so
Yeah, anyway.
we're just like any other
Right.
household. When you're raising kids, lies and a little bit of deceit is part of everyday life. I remember one incident though when we were on holiday and we told all of you that you cannot go on the Wi-Fi, no gaming, no social media, nothing, because it would have cost us an absolute fortune. And so you all agreed to this, but one of you, however, did break that rule. One of you went on the Wi-Fi, went gaming, went on social media, and the bill that we got through for that cost us more than the actual holiday cost. Who was that?
What?
That
I
was me.
about 2.
So that was you.
Yeah.
But I remember you talking recently and telling us what lesson you learnt from that. So
Yeah.
tell me a little bit about that.
Well, I got the opportunity to share this story in church a few years ago now, and yeah, it was. Well, I just remember the overwhelming sense of guilt afterwards, because I remember me and you sat that morning after holiday where you've just come back, everyone's in bed, and we would come down with watching telly. It's nice and calm house, and Mum.
I
The
was
living
the, I
room.
was
The
the
SWAT
crazy lady. But I had to be. Raising 3 boys, there was no such a thing for me as gentle parenting.
No,
I was
gentle parenting wasn't a thing back then either. And Mum would come in. She said, "You've spent all of our money, thousands of pounds on an O2 bill." And I'd been on like Facebook and football scores and transfer window and just doing all stuff on the data, and I'd put this bill up. And anyway, you'd come in, you annihilated us, annihilated me, and then I just remember that being terrified of my dad's response. What's my dad gonna say? And all day I just kind of hid in my room, and he come up to the bedroom later on that night, and he just put his arm around me, and he was, I was crying. I was saying, I'm so sorry. I can't believe I've let you down. And, the message in that was the father heart of God. I know we would talk about Mother's Day, but I think that was just a general kind of rule of thumb for our house, is that yes, there might be an initial response, but it always comes back to, we'll always love you. Well, prodigal son, or in not even straying too far into that story, but we're always love you. We're always gonna love you no matter what mistakes you make, etc.
Yeah. And I think it's important to know that there is always consequence, but there is always forgiveness, and it is having that balance. There is no point in, when your children mess up, just diving off at the deep end. You've always got to be able to teach them, we love you, that's never going to change, but there will be a consequence for what you've been through. And I think that was just a great lesson, the way that your dad was with you through that season. Belonging to a Christian household and growing up the way you did, with the faith life that you did, the way we were doing church on a Sunday, the belief system that you had. You didn't go to Christian schools, you went to secular schools. Did it ever cause you any issues at school? What was it like having the upbringing that you were having at home and our faith journey, and then going to a secular school and the friends you were making there? What was that like for you? You answer that, Sol?
I think for me personally, it was like it was all right. Like, it was pretty. People just kind of you know, you're doing your own thing, like you're a Christian, whatever, people wouldn't really pay too much attention to it. You'd get like an odd comment sometimes, but it wouldn't really like bother you as such. I think the struggle was more so having your church friends and then going into a place where all the people your age are just not in church and they're not Christian and they're not from Christian families, and it makes it a little bit difficult because you can be very easily influenced into just being of the world in that sense and not really maintain, you know, your language might slip a little bit, and it sometimes just puts a temptation in front of you that you wouldn't normally experience in a church circle. So when you're a teenager, it's a little bit more difficult because I think you're more easily influenced. So I think that definitely played a role. So yeah.
I think my school experience was very different to both Isaac and Sol's, because Solomon was always the rule keeper.
Yes.
And I've always been the rule breaker.
So what was I?
You didn't know what the word rule
Just
even
little
was.
Isaac.
You were all
Okay.
onto yourself.
And yeah. So yeah, when I used to break the rules, I'd try and see how I could bend them and break them, and I opposite to Sol was quite steadfast in school, and I remember being quite swayed heavily in school and making some wrong choices, making some wrong friendship choices, doing some things that, you know, I wouldn't advocate my own son doing now. But I remember, and I also remember that being quite a hard season for you, because I would be wanting to go to the park on a Friday night and hang out in the wrong crowds, and
I actually
throughout
didn't want you
school.
to go to the
Yeah,
park.
but it
And
was-
I'd be at the bedroom window and you'd turn around and you would wave at me with a really smug grin. And I just, I hated that season.
Yeah, and it was my dad again in that season, who kind of, his thing was go and let him figure it out himself and he'll make the right decision. And I remember there was a breaking point, I say it in school years, but I'd probably say around 14, 15, where I just knew I wasn't doing what I'm called to be doing. And I just remember it was a moment at a men's conference, and the penny just dropped. But again, that's that whole thing about teaching a child in the ways of the Lord, and they will not depart from it. And I'd always knew it was wrong, everything that I'd get up to and everything, all the bits in school, and I'd be getting in trouble in school quite often, and you'd be getting brought into meetings in school for my behaviour.
I would.
And then, you know, so I always knew I shouldn't be doing it, and that's why it was so easy to revert and go back home and kind of know exactly what it is that I'm called to be.
A bit like a prodigal son, kind of, when he returned to father's house, he just knew this is where I belong, this is what's right for me, but he felt like he had to go and try everything first. Yeah.
I think for me it was probably, I was not academic, but I was in the early stages of high school, in the early years. I was quite a good kid, it was just the classic, you know, maybe just chat in class or something. But and I think there was a few like Christians, but not like Christians that we were, because it wasn't like we were just Christians and people go, I've been Christian. It's like, that doesn't mean you're a Christian. We obviously have always been brought up to live by the red text and what Jesus did and Jesus said. So I think when your parents are not only faith followers and stuff like that, and Jesus followers, it, you know, your pastors as well, there was that weight of it. So it was like being in a school setting. There was obviously, like Sol said, the comments, and yeah, I didn't really go to the park and do those things that Joash did. I was somewhere in the middle. But yeah, I just felt like it was more of a weight, because people knew, oh, he doesn't just like call himself a Christian, like this is actually his life, and this is all he does, and this is what they live for. So
yeah, that's great. So when you were kids, I would like for me, especially when you're raising children, it's not about getting them to know quantity of Bible, but it's the quality of the bit of Bible that they do know, which becomes an anchor for your life. Because it's not about reading reams of Bible per se, and you don't really understand. You know, we talk from Bible principles, and we'd talk through Bible stories, and we'd try and make them real and relate them to your everyday life. But there were certain anchor scriptures that I would give to you. We'd either put them on your bedroom wall, we'd write them in your Bibles, I would make sure you know them. We would pray them, we would sing them of a night. We would literally, and they became, I think, anchor verses for you as you grew up through life. Tell me what they were for you and what that particular verse means to you.
I'll go. So for me, it was, I always remember going through seasons of not knowing what the future would hold, especially in high school. Sort of similarly to Isaac, I'm not naturally academic, so I was always an overthinker. I didn't know what would happen if I failed this exam, and I was very much a skeptic about everything that would happen after school. And I always remember you and Dad just reciting Jeremiah 29:11 over me, talking about the plans that God had for my life, and I just needed to trust in those, especially in seasons of turbulence where, maybe grades weren't as good as they could have been, or I was never really great at maths. Maths was always my bogey subject that I just was never naturally great at. And I remember you praying that over me and just sort of, telling me that if I put the work in and if I do the revision at home and if I just do everything that I can with my hands, then God will do the rest. And I just need to trust in that plan. So
Brilliant. You also had bouts of childhood anxiety.
Yeah.
And we literally had huge print put on your bedroom wall that you would quote and read and say every single night.
Do you hear me now?
Go on.
I reckon
Go
I do
on.
now, yeah.
What? And we used to look at it and we used to pray it and say it. And sometimes you'd wake up in the night and I would hear you saying it. Go on, Sol.
It was, I am the son of the king, that makes me royalty, mighty like a warrior, brave as can be. Everywhere I go, I know my God is with me.
Brilliant. And did that feel like it became an anchor for you as well? I feel like that was a turning point of you absolutely knowing God is with me.
Yeah, I remember I used to say warrior.
Warrior. I am a warrior.
I remember you correcting me once. So I used to, every time I say it now, I always really emphasize the A. It's like a muscle memory thing because I never wanted to sound like a warrior. I always say warrior because it doesn't even make any sense, but it was just what you
got the American twang.
Yeah.
Yeah. What about you, Isaac?
Every time I'd mess up, I'll be like, God, which is kind of ironic because that got a friend who's releasing a song about it, but it's after David and Bathsheba, and it's all about take not your spirit away from me.
Okay.
And I used to, every time I mess up,
panic,
I'd be like,
God was taking
God,
the
I know,
spirit away.
for sure, I've messed up, and I know I'm gonna face the consequences, but God, just please don't take your spirit away from me. I really struggled with identity growing up, so I really struggled with Joash and Sol would be heavily involved in church, and their gifting was almost evident, and you could see it and what they were doing. So
They're both the musicians.
And stuff. So, whereas I always have been behind the scenes, even though my personality type is the exact opposite. So I think for me, it was kind of like trusting in God in everything of that. That no matter where I felt in the identity search, if it just continues trusting Him, then He will guide my path.
Great, love that. What about you, Joe?
I don't know if just slightly different to Isaac. I do obviously remember Proverbs 3 verse 5 quite a lot. Obviously Psalm 91 through your time of being ill, and then also I can't remember if you taught me directly this verse, but I remember learning it growing up, Galatians 6 verse 7.
Yeah.
Whatever a man sows, he will reap. And I just always remember that being quite an important principle. That whatever we do, whether it is work, whether it is ministry, whether it's family, what we sow into that, we will reap. So if we're gonna, as a dad now, if I'm gonna wake up and sow anger, and if I'm gonna sow, moodiness and stressfulness into my day, then I'm going to reap that throughout the day, whether it be with Jess, my wife, or my kids. But if I wake up and decide now I'm going to sow seeds of happiness, and I'm going to sow seeds of excitement and joy and wonder with my children, then they're all the things that I'll reap. So that's been
great. Your anchor Bible verse. And that actually makes me smile because I raised you and I know what those teenage years were like, and I can't wait to see what you reap raising your beautiful little boy.
I'm
He's
more
gonna
scared of a liar.
Oh, are
A
you?
Brian Girl
He's
is
gonna
more
be
terrifying.
Yeah, you're gonna have a good boy and a. No, they're great kids. Okay, you just mentioned it there, so let's just go there about that season when I got sick, because I think you were all at different ages and seasons of life. You two were in your early teens.
No, I was in university.
Yeah.
You were at a really pivotal time in life. You were just taking your GCSEs.
No, A levels. Going for A levels.
Was it A levels? Not GCSEs?
2015 A levels.
And Sol, you were a little bit younger, and so at those sort of times, it was, and we talk about it from the platform. I've shared my perspective on that season of life, and your dad shared his, but let's hear it from your perspective. And so, because every family goes through different seasons and different things, and we have gone through some seasons. But that one particularly, when you get a diagnosis of cancer in the family, you never know which way it's going to go. You don't really know what the outcome is like. So let's just talk around that for a moment, because I know, for example, Solomon, we never told you the full picture. I think you were 9 years old. And you knew that I was sick. You knew that I was in hospital having treatment, but you just didn't know the severity of what we were going through. And I actually remember one of the reasons why was because you just had a friend's dog who died from cancer. So the word already carried a huge negative mindset for you. And and we just didn't want to put the burden, the weight of that on you. You boys were a little bit older, so we kind of journeyed it with you without overwhelming you. But we did some things. First of all, let's just talk about this as a family. We decided that certain words carry fear, so we were going to ban them from the house. Can you remember what words we said we were going to ban from the house? We were not going to talk about, we didn't use the word cancer. We would talk about mum being ill, and chemotherapy was another word we chose not to use, and just certain key words. And it wasn't that we were in denial, it was just that sometimes language has fear attached to it, and we didn't want to give that fear a place in our home. Let me ask you both, Joash and Isaac, first of all, having been anchored in a faith-filled household, having been raised in the ways of God, how did being able to go to God yourself and pray, how did that have an effect on you? Did you find release in that? Because I always think when people go through things and you don't know God, what do you do with the fear, the anxiety, the frustration? Where do you take that to? So what did that season look like for you two?
I think that season was, looking back, kind of just a bit of a blur. I don't really remember it, to be honest. I remember just blanking out in university. I think because our dad is such a, he'd probably describe himself sometimes as an overthinker, and I know from our conversations with him following that season, he said himself it was really hard for him to be the husband and the dad all at once, and there was so many emotions in the household. But I remember just the his priority in that moment was you. And I remember actually the community of church being so important at that time. I remember the day that it all come out. I remember Sarah Palmer giving me a call, and Sarah's been Auntie Sarah to us, and the Palmers have been our kind of family, and she's your best friend, and she knew that you went in a place to have a conversation with me.
Yeah.
So I remember I was outside, and I remember she called me, and I remember having a cry down the phone to her. I remember we had other friends in church who had family members go through similar things, and they would pick us up and they'd take us out for food. And I remember that was the power of the church at that time, was when families going through something, your wider family comes in and picks up the slack and the
So good.
weight. That's what I remember relying heavy on in that time, was the church community.
So good.
Yeah, probably similar. Again, we kind of did everything together anyway, especially in that season. I just remember at home it would be very tense because I think you'd always associate the word cancer to death. Like growing up, that was just the thing. It was like I'd known so many friends in school who had lost family, whether it was grandparents or parents, through cancer, and it was like, if you get that, that's it kind of thing. And so I just remember that being like I remember actually finding out and sitting at the kitchen table looking. We had that clock, and it was like a Victorian style clock in the kitchen, and I just remember staring at it, and the time was the past hours, and I just remember just being like blanked out. But I do remember the Palmers coming over, and being like, "It's gonna be all right," and I was like, "No, it's not." But it was quite high tense at home, and it wasn't because of anything. It was all new to us for one, and we're just trying to figure out as a family how to move forward. And I remember Dad coming to me once in my room, and I remember him saying, I was saying you couldn't use the word can't, and like, I can't, it won't or something. And I was saying, oh, what if it doesn't work or it won't work and stuff like that. And he was like, you were not allowed to use those words because that brings in doubt. And the moment we start doubting, it's the moment we start believing kind
How
of thing.
did you believe, like as individuals, what did your prayer life look like over that season? Like, I think I'm just trying to find out who was God to you in that
I
moment.
actually remember the story just come to me then. I remember there was a promo on Instagram months and months and months and months before any of it about this new guy. He was releasing a book called Through the Eyes of a Lion, and it's Levi Lusko's story about when his daughter passed away. And I remember ordering the book, and the day it arrived was the day that you told us
Wow.
you were poorly. And I remember it was, I think you just left the Amazon package on my, or whatever, the box from America on my bed. And I remember I read that book within like 3 days. And I don't know what, to be honest, I couldn't recite the book to you now. It's not imprinted, but I just remember that being like a bit of a safety net, that, if Levi, the way he spoke, and about, actually finding God again and finding Jesus through his daughter passing away. I just remember this overwhelming sense of peace. The Bible talks about a peace that transcends all understanding. And I just remember God being a God of peace in that. As soon as I read that book, it was like, okay, it's going to be all right. So just a sense of peace, yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I remember you talking about that book. I think I had one called Unreasonable Hope, during Chad Veach's one, and it was about his daughter, G. And it was, again, all about that, and I think you had to learn a whole new way of, like, it was probably, I was at that pivotal age, 15, 16, of going, do I have to believe this because this is my mum and dad's belief, or, like, is this something I need to, like, really go all in? And I didn't really have a choice at that point, because it was like, well, if it's just my mum and dad's thing, then I might as well stop now. So I think my prayer life and stuff changed from there, because it was like you were clinging on to a miracle, but you didn't really know what that miracle was.
Are you able to go to God for yourself when you can't really go to mum and dad at that season?
Yeah.
So then you find God for yourself. Let me just ask you also, Sol, because we didn't give you the full facts, because there's actually 10 years between you and Joash, and you were a lot younger. And you had one of those cabin beds in your bedroom, and the old style cabin beds had like drawers or a desk underneath, but behind them there was like a space where children could make a den or a little hideaway. And when you got older, like we've come through the cancer now and life is good again, and you're a little bit older, and we came to sell the bed. So I pulled it away from your bedroom wall to tidy it up and take some photographs ready to sell it. And I absolutely got the shock of my life, because you had made a war room under your bed in this little den. And you actually, I'd been watching the movie during my season of sickness, Priscilla Shire's The War Room. And you were a little boy, you were sitting on the floor, you were actually playing with your trains when the movie was on. And this is such a testimony to mothers, because you don't actually know what your children are picking up in the environment that you're creating. So I'm watching Priscilla Shire's The War Room, where she talks about finding a safe place, finding a room, finding a closet, somewhere to go and really go to war with God in prayer. He's playing with his trains on the floor, but unbeknown to me, he went upstairs and he created his own war room, and he put a piece of paper on the wall, and actual prayer requests were on there. There was specific people. There was me, my journey, and I absolutely sobbed when I found this room. And I asked him about it, and this little boy just looked at me and he said, "Mum, I always knew you had cancer. Nobody ever told me, but I knew, so I was praying anyway." Just talk to me a little bit about that, Sol, because we never told you because we were trying to protect you. Then it turns out you knew anyway, so you ended up having to do the whole journey, not being able to talk to anybody, but God.
Yeah, no, it was confusing for a long time, but not confusing enough to make me like think a lot about it. Like, you know, when you were saying, "Oh, Mum's ill," that was just like straight over my head.
Yeah.
Like, Mum's just poorly. I used to go again to the Palmers and spend the day there when Dad would go in for treatment. I figured it out, and then I like stuff used to happen, and I just never thought about it. Like when we used to go on holiday, all I wanted to do was come round the rainbow slide. And every year it was like, "Oh, I can't. You said something about I can't get my hair wet." And I used to get so
we went on
annoyed.
holiday because I'd lost my hair, and it didn't really, we didn't process that. Do you know why? Because I lost all my hair, right? And you were such a little boy that I think I tried to handle it in my own way. So I got a hair replacement system, because I remember sitting in the hospital when we were told that I was going to lose all my hair, eyebrows, eyelashes. That's what chemotherapy does to a lot of people. And I remember saying to your dad, "We're going to look like two snooker balls in bed." And I didn't want that for you. So yeah, we used to go on holiday and I used to say, "I can't go in the pool, can't get my hair wet."
Yeah, that used to really annoy me. Because all I wanted you to do was come down the rainbow slide. So there was that, and I think over time, like stuff just started to like. I think because it went on for quite a while, I just started to figure some stuff out. Like in the older venues, you'd have your own room that was separate, and it was just like, I used to just think, "Oh, this is cool. This is Mum and Dad's."
And it was
cool
because
room.
I had no immune system, so I couldn't be around crowds. So I'd come to church and then I'd have to isolate.
So I remember all of that, and then I think when I was making the prayer list, it was always just for Mum to get better. Like trying to process that, like especially after when you didn't tell me. I knew you were going to say that because I remember my friend's pet having that diagnosis, and it freaked me out. And I'm like overthinking. I'm like an overthinker naturally. So I just remember it being like a very confusing time. But yeah, I made that little war room because I do remember watching it with you. What was it? Is it called War Room? That movie.
Yeah.
And I remember seeing Grandma show me hers as well, and she had like it on a folded cupboard thing, and I thought I want to make one of those, and I did in my den. So it was confusing, but in the end, I was really grateful that you didn't tell me. It means looking back on it, it's a bit more like, because I had to figure it out. It was more difficult in that sense, but I think if you told me, I just think at that age,
it would have been a weight. I just wouldn't have put a weight on you.
And because you were quite anxious as a child as well, I think.
Yeah.
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 So did you used to literally go in that little cubby hole underneath your bed
Yeah.
and did you used to pray? That was your prayer. You'd written scriptures out. You'd put
I
scriptures up
covered
there.
the whole thing.
Yeah.
In like, I don't know. I was creative. I'm not a good drawer at
Yeah.
all. But I'd go through phases where I'd try, and I used to like making it look cool and then going time.
So when we went through things as a family and when we went through that season, we'd have anchor verses. What was it?
Psalm 91.
Psalm 91. Who got it tattooed on the body?
Loved it.
And next.
It's just Solomon.
That'll be my first.
Solomon was actually the first because we went
Like
we
my
went on
tattoo.
holiday. When I got the old clue, we went on holiday and he went onto the beach and remember he came
Oh,
back
yeah.
Oh, like
he had a
it
henna
was like
tattoo
a
on his
tattoo.
shoulder, Psalm 91. So Psalm 91 was that you brought me a bracelet with Psalm 91. It's just an absolute anchor verse because it talks about doing life hid under the shadow and the shelter of Almighty God. And boys, I just want to say thank you so much for sharing your hearts today. I know that some stuff is hard to talk about, but I promise you that even everything that's been hurtful to us is going to be so helpful to somebody else. But you know what? Just before we finish, I want to ask you a question. 3 questions. Who was the messy one growing up? Who do you think was the most messiest? Look at life from my point of view.
Not me, definitely not.
No.
Yeah,
Oh,
it's not
oh,
Isaac. It's not.
Me or
Are we
Smee-
talking
me
about mess as in
Messy.
life mess or just kitchen mess?
Life
Because if
mess
it's
is
life mess,
Isaac.
it could be on.
I'm talking about mess in a house.
Okay.
Who is the messiest?
Probably
Messy
me,
bedroom, messy
me and
house?
Sol are both very similar.
Yeah, I'd
Yeah.
say even Sol maybe tips you just
What?
that little bit.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would say.
Yeah.
Who's the drama queen?
Isaac.
Isaac.
No.
You messing me? What?
There's no way.
Absolute drama
Right.
queen. Who's the hardest to raise? Who's the hardest child to raise?
Me.
Joey.
Do you reckon? Yeah.
Definitely.
I kick back at everything. Still do
Definitely.
now.
However, you're all still alive. You're all still here. We all survived. And I love you. So thank you very much for coming on and joining us for this week's podcast of Braveheart Talks. Girls' conference is fast approaching and I am encouraging you, don't leave it to last minute. Tickets are going out like hotcakes and you want to make sure that you are in the room. So check the link in our bio and please like, share, subscribe to this podcast and we can't wait to see you back next week.